Hi everyone, and welcome to Jane Talks Murder, where I'll be talking about and reviewing an episode of Poirot, Murder, She Wrote, Diagnosis Murder, or Jonathan Creek. Today, I'm looking at Poirot, the tragedy at Marsdon Manor, or as I like to call it, that time a spooky tree could be the killer. We begin the episode with some dude shooting at shit in the woods before muttering and walking off. Aw, poor birdo. Hey, don't poke it! Susan goes rushing to Jonathan's aid and walks him back towards the house where this woman is at her scowling window. The pair stops at a bench where Susan tells him off for not following the doctor's advice and he complains about his ulcer. Wait, why do I know this woman? Oh, she was in Jonathan Creek in that silly episode. Wait, I'll have to narrow it down. You know, the one with the frogs in the ark. And fun fact, creator of Jonathan Creek, David Renwick, dramatized this episode of Poirot. Good for him. Anyway, Susan freaks out over bird noises, stares down the camera, and complains about a face in the tree. Perfectly normal! She says some bitch in the tree has been laughing at her, while Poirot and Hastings rock up to a hotel where owner Samuel is thrilled to meet them, but Poirot is more interested in the murder case he's been hired for, which turns out to be this guy's unfinished book. He wants help to solve the crime and finish the plot, and this expression is priceless. And Poirot rants about his time being wasted, before Hastings suggests a visit to the local wax museum. Poirot is unimpressed by the creepy shit until he finds a model of himself, but it's closing time, so get out. The doctor examines Jonathan and tells him to take care of himself, and as Poirot and Hastings check in for the night, they meet this guy who is heading for Marsdon Manor. He presents Susan with a carving from his travels, but she's not a fan. And Captain Black meets the doctor. Captain Black sounds like a Cluedo character. Jonathan asks Miss Rawlinson to join them for dinner, but she says she's busy and scowls, and Susan tells everyone about the woman in the tree, which Jonathan says is apparently the ghost of a teenage girl from 50 years ago who jumped from the tree. The doc says it's nonsense, but Susan insists what she sees is real, and then acts shifty, before going upstairs and stroking her new statue. The next morning, in this boss-ass conservatory that's bigger than my entire house, Susan paints, and Miss Rawlinson announces she's going out, as Jonathan clomps around the grounds, settling on the bench. Poirot goes to breakfast and tells Samuel his book is unsolvable and complains about his accommodation.
The duck feather pillows. It feels as if the ducks are stealing them.
And Samuel notices that Captain Black has gone, despite paying for a week, and tells Poirot about the ghosts up at the manor. Susan has finished her painting by the time Miss Rawlinson gets back, and the gardener rushes up before we cut to a scene of Poirot shooing the police, who are excited by his presence. Well, Jonathan is dead. I thought he'd be the victim, but wanted to wait for confirmation first, before I call it here that Susan is the killer. I think she's making the ghost shut up to cover the fact that she's an evil mastermind. Miss Rawlinson tells Poirot that Jonathan's ulcer must have ruptured, and there's nothing suspicious going on, while Danvers becomes an exposition fairy and tells Hastings all about Jonathan. While Susan mopes in the conservatory, Poirot does the downward dog and spots something.
What have you found? What I was looking for.
This guy's face. And then he steps on an egg, which Poirot is interested in. Hastings tells him that it was natural causes, but Poirot points out that ridges and mud means the body was moved, and he marches off to phone Jap. Susan necks some booze and explains Jonathan's ulcer history before blaming the laughing ghost, which she thinks scared him to death. But Jap pulls out a life insurance policy and thinks Jonathan did this to himself so Susan could have the payout. Poirot points out that's not evident, and plus, how can a man move his own dead body? And Samuel bumbles around trying to be helpful. That night, this poor sod has to guard the tree. Wait, now it's suddenly daytime? And Poirot talks in riddles, before Susan flashes back to a time the mirror started bleeding, and explains what she was doing at the time of death, before running off crying, "Okay, bye then!" Poirot goes to see the doc, who says the ulcer was a risk, but Jonathan was pretty hardy, before discovering a bottle of chloroform is missing. So Poirot and Hastings run to a meeting in town, where everyone is rocking gas masks, and he shouts for Susan in the crowd. Oh, she's down. Poirot wants a doctor for her. Dude, you were just at one. And Captain Black hangs around ominously before making a run for it, only to be apprehended by Jap. Susan comes to, and Poirot discovers chloroform in a gas mask. Oh, she 100% did that to herself. If a character gets a little bit poisoned in a murder mystery story, then they always turn out to be the killer. The police rummage through the trash and find the bottle, and Poirot sends Hastings off with Susan. So Japp interrogates Captain Black, but he won't talk. So Poirot says he loves Susan, and he finally admits to it. He says he legged it, hoping to run from his feelings, but returned when he heard of Jonathan's death. And Poirot gets excited about the gift Captain Black got for Susan. Hastings admires Susan's artwork before Miss Rawlinson tells him to buzz off, and Susan presents him with the painting and says she can't stand Miss Rawlinson, as she and Jonathan used to bang. She invites him and Poirot back for dinner, and Hastings meets Poirot for lunch, where Poirot is distracted by the painting and says it's the key to the whole mystery. Although Hastings doesn't get it, and his eggs get Poirot even more wound up. Japp calls with news that Poirot already worked out, and Poirot gives him instructions before solving Samuel's book problem and asks for a favour in return. Captain Black goes to see Susan, looking like a Guess Who character, and that evening dinner is quiet and awkward with spooky lights and creaky doors. And that's hella creepy! Poirot pretends like nothing is wrong, even when Susan has blood on her hand, which she says is her husband's, and admits to killing him. The lights come on, Japp saunters in, and Samuel takes off his freaky Jonathan mask. And then Captain Black asks if Susan did all of this for him, but she just laughs at him. Ouch! Miss Rawlinson is confused, so Poirot explains the mask is courtesy of the Wax Museum, and the blood was red paint Poirot wiped on Susan's hand, the same trick she used in the flashback. He says Susan made up the ghost story in the tree, obviously, to try and scare Jonathan enough for his ulcer to kill him, and when that didn't work, she shot a tiny bullet through his mouth into his brain before stashing the gun in the hedge, which knocked over the nest, and she dragged his body to the tree. If that all wasn't enough, she then gassed herself to throw suspicion elsewhere, and she's carted off, leaving Captain Black all sad. Poirot explains to Japp and Hastings that Susan's idea of how to kill Jonathan came from a headline in the newspaper wrapped around the present Captain Black got her, and the painting gave her away, as if she'd painted the picture when she claimed she did, instead of going off murdering, the shadows would have been going the other way. Content with a job well done, Poirot shows Japp and Hastings his waxwork, and they mess with it. Right, straight off the bat, this episode is clear and concise with very little filler in it, which I appreciate. When I'm writing scripts for these videos, I tend to skip over unnecessary fluff, but with this episode, I don't think I skipped over anything, unlike Black Canary, which I covered previously. I may have clocked pretty quickly that Susan was going to be the killer, but that's only because I watch these kinds of shows a lot and know what to look for. But as a standalone story, it was compelling and a lot of fun to follow along with. From a suspect point of view, there weren't that many of them, seeing as the gardener wasn't really established as a character. But from a story perspective, having both Captain Black and Miss Rawlinson seemed rather redundant, as they both served the same function, and either could have been removed and the story would have remained the same. My choice would have been to remove Captain Black, seeing as he wasn't there when the crime took place. He wasn't any part of the motive, Susan just wanted money, and the newspaper clue was rather tenuous and could have come from anywhere. Nevertheless, the mystery was nice and compact, the setting was gorgeous, the faked ghost story was an interesting idea, and the painting shadows being in the wrong place is probably the cleverest clue in the history of Poirot. I just wish it had been more of a haha gotcha Susan moment, rather than just explain to Hastings right at the end. All in all, a great episode, and the reason why I generally prefer the hour-long episodes. We have one victim, Jonathan Maltravers, who was shot in the mouth for his life insurance by his wife, Susan Maltravers, who tried to blame it on a ghost in the tree. So there you have it. That was the tragedy at Marsdon Manor. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or come say hi on social media. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button, it really does mean a lot, or consider subscribing if you want to keep investigating with me. Alternatively, feel free to check out my other YouTube channels. Thank you so much for watching, I'll speak to you soon, and keep an eye out for clues!